Most people imagine fashion beginning in a city, a palace, or perhaps the first shop that discovered changing the hemline could sell the same garment twice. It did not begin with a dress. It may have begun with a seashell small enough to disappear in your palm. At Bismoon Cave in Morocco, archaeologists recovered 33 perforated marine shells from deposits at least 142,000 years old. Most came from the same species of sea snail. Some carried traces of red pigment, and the cave was roughly 30 to 50 kilometers from the coast when they were deposited. Someone had selected those shells, carried them inland, and probably suspended them so other people could see them. They offered no warmth. They did not make hunting easier. They were useful mainly because they changed the appearance of a human body. That sounds like fashion, but it creates a problem. A necklace is decoration. Fashion is something slightly more complicated. To find the first fashion, we have to separate three inventions that are usually bundled together: clothing, adornment, and style. And the oldest of those may be the least glamorous. Early clothes were almost certainly made from hides, fur, or plant fibers. These materials rot, so the first wardrobe left almost no wardrobe behind. Archaeologists have to reconstruct it from indirect evidence: skinning marks on bones, tools used to process hides, and, unexpectedly, lice. Clothing lice live in garments and lay their eggs there. Genetic research suggests that they diverged from head lice at least around 83,000 years ago, and possibly as early as 170,000 years ago. The statistical range is much wider, so this is not a precise birthday for clothing. It is evidence that clothing had become a regular habitat. By that point, humans were wearing it often enough to create housing for a new kind of parasite. At Contrabandier's cave, also in Morocco, researchers found bone tools dated to roughly 120,000 to 90,000 years ago. Several were shaped like broad spatulas suited to scraping hides. Nearby fox, jackal, and wildcat bones carried marks consistent with removing fur. This is some of the strongest archaeological evidence for early clothing production. It is not a fossilized jacket. It is the prehistoric equivalent of finding a sewing workshop after every piece of fabric has vanished. But clothing is not automatically fashion. A hide wrapped around the body because the weather is cold solves a physical problem. Fashion begins when appearance starts solving social problems. Who are you? Which group do you belong to? What is your role? Are you important, available, dangerous, grieving, celebrating, or simply making an effort? Humans may have been answering those questions with color before they answered them with jewelry. Mineral pigments, such as ochre, were collected and modified hundreds of thousands of years ago. A recent archaeological framework places the early cultural transformation of the body at least 400,000 years in the past, with pigment use becoming much more common later. But ochre is frustrating evidence. It can color skin or clothing, yet it can also help make adhesives, process hides, repel insects, or protect skin. Archaeologists find the pigment. They do not find the face it was painted on. At Pinnacle Point in South Africa, people were selecting and modifying red pigment about 164,000 years ago, probably for symbolic purposes. That is suggestive, but it is not a preserved makeup tutorial. The Moroccan shell beads are different. A perforated shell worn on the body has an obvious visual purpose. The repeated selection of similar shells across early North African sites suggests that people were following shared conventions. The object could communicate identity even when the wearer said nothing. That is a major change. Information had become portable. A painted body can send a message. A bead can preserve that message, travel with its owner, be exchanged, repaired, copied, inherited, or deliberately worn in a different way. The human body was becoming a display surface, and objects were becoming part of the language. This would have mattered most when social worlds extended beyond a few familiar faces.